Here is a sentence that should not make sense, but somehow perfectly captures where beauty culture is right now. People are paying hundreds of dollars, sitting through hours of needles, and enduring weeks of swelling and healing, all so they can look like they are not wearing any makeup at all. Welcome to lip blushing, the procedure taking over beauty clinics from Lagos to Johannesburg to Accra. And today, on Africa Daily, we are going to look past this soft, luxurious Instagram branding and ask the questions that the glossy before and after photos are not answering. What is actually happening under that needle? Why does this procedure carry specific risks for melanin-rich skin that most clinics are not telling their clients about? And what does the whole trend say about the pressure African women and, increasingly, African men are under to look effortlessly, permanently perfect? I am your host. Let's get into it. Part 1. What lip blushing actually is. Let's start with the basics because a lot of the marketing language around this procedure is designed to obscure exactly what it is. Lip blushing is a form of semi-permanent cosmetic tattooing. A technician uses a machine with fine needles to deposit pigment into the upper layers of the lip skin, not the deep dermis where a traditional body tattoo sits, which is why the color is described as semi-permanent rather than permanent, but into skin nonetheless. The needle punctures the surface repeatedly, layer by layer, session by session, implanting color that is designed to mimic a natural, healthy lip tint. The appeal is obvious once you say it out loud. No more reapplying lipstick throughout the day, no more worrying about lipstick transferring to a cup or a mask or a partner's collar. Wake up every single morning with lips that already have color, definition, and, if the procedure goes well, symmetry that took years of practice with a lip liner to achieve manually. For a generation raised on filtered selfies and the specific aesthetic that social media has popularized, commonly called the clean girl look or soft glam, lip blushing promises something that no amount of makeup skill can fully deliver: the appearance of not trying at all. Beauty that looks accidental. Beauty that looks genetic. And that is precisely the paradox worth sitting with for a moment. The entire pitch of lip blushing is naturalness. The entire mechanism of lip blushing is a tattoo gun. Now, here is the part of this story that most beauty influencers gloss over, and it is the part that matters most for an African audience specifically. Lip blushing on melanin-rich skin is not the same procedure, technically, as lip blushing on fair skin. And the reason has to do with the underlying pigmentation that many people with deeply melanated skin naturally carry in their lips. Many people with deeply melanated skin have lips with cool undertones baked into the natural pigmentation. Tones of blue, purple, brown, or gray sitting beneath the surface. This is completely normal. It is simply how melanin distributes in that particular tissue for a lot of people, but it creates a specific technical problem for a lip blushing artist. If a technician applies a pink or rose pigment directly on top of those cool undertones without accounting for them, the pigment does not simply sit on top and look pink. It mixes optically with what is already there, and the result can heal muddy, grayish, or in the worst cases, looking like a bruise that never fades. To manage this, some lip artists have developed a technique called melanin neutralization, sometimes described as color correction. Before any final lip color is applied, warm pigments, oranges, ochres, golden tones are implanted first, specifically to counteract and cancel out the cooler undertones sitting beneath the skin. Only once that layer has fully healed, which can take weeks, does the artist go back in for a second or third session to implant the actual intended lip color. Think about what that means in practical terms for a client. What might be marketed as a single lip blushing appointment in a fair-skinned market can become a multi-month process for a client with deeply melanated skin. Multiple painful sessions, multiple healing periods, multiple opportunities for something to go wrong, all in pursuit of an outcome that a lighter-skinned client might achieve in a single sitting. This is not a minor technical footnote. This is a fundamental difference in risk, cost, and time commitment that should be central to every consultation an African client has before booking this procedure, and from the accounts we have gathered, is often mentioned only briefly, if at all. This is not a fringe beauty trend anymore. It has become a serious commercial category across major African cities. Luxury beauty clinics in Lagos, in Johannesburg, in Accra, and increasingly in Nairobi and Kigali are marketing lip blushing and the accompanying melanin neutralization process as a premium service, not budget cosmetic work, premium. The pricing reflects that positioning. High-end procedures can run into the hundreds of dollars, and for clients requiring extensive color correction work before the final blush, the total cost across multiple sessions can climb well beyond $1,000. The marketing language leans heavily on words like elegance, sophistication, and self-care. This is a deliberate branding choice, and it works because it repositions what is fundamentally a cosmetic tattooing procedure involving needles, trauma to delicate tissue, and a real healing process as an aspirational lifestyle purchase, closer to a spa day than a medical procedure. And the client base is expanding in a direction that surprises a lot of people. This is no longer a service marketed exclusively to women pursuing a specific aesthetic. A growing number of men are now seeking a version of the same procedure, most often not for a dramatic color change, but to correct uneven pigmentation, to address the darker patches that can develop from smoking, or simply to even out natural lip tone. The framing for men leans away from anything resembling makeup. The marketing language for male clients is almost always about correction and evenness rather than color or beauty. What both markets share is the same underlying promise: permanence sold as convenience and correction sold as enhancement. Now, let's talk about what happens when this procedure does not go as planned. Because for every glossy transformation photo circulating on Instagram, there is a much larger, much less visible population of people living with results they did not want and cannot simply wash off. The first category of failure is pigmentation mismatch. If a technician uses low-quality pigment, misjudges needle depth, applies excessive pressure, or simply misunderstands the color theory required for a specific undertone, the healed result can come out gray, blue-tinted, patchy, or noticeably darker than the client's natural lip color. In some documented cases, the body's own healing response compounds the problem. Trauma to the skin triggers increased melanin production during recovery, meaning some clients end up with lips that are darker after the procedure than they were before it. For a procedure explicitly marketed as an enhancement, that outcome is about as far from the promised result as it is possible to get. The second category involves needle depth specifically. Lips are extremely delicate tissue with fine, precise natural borders. If pigment is implanted too deep, the color can heal with an ashy or bluish cast rather than the soft, natural tone that was promised. And because that border between lip and skin is so fine, poor technique can cause what is called pigment migration, the ink slowly spreading outward beyond the natural lip line over the weeks and months following the procedure. Instead of crisp, defined lips, the client is left with something that reads as smudged or blurred permanently. The third and most serious category is tissue damage. In cases of repeated trauma, overly aggressive technique, or complications during healing, some clients develop painful nodules, scar tissue, or lasting textural changes to the lip itself. At that point, the conversation is no longer about achieving a beauty enhancement. It is about damage control, trying to repair a cosmetic outcome that has gone seriously wrong, sometimes through corrective tattooing, sometimes through laser pigment removal, which itself carries its own cost, pain, and uncertain outcome. And there is a fourth risk that gets far less attention than it deserves, and it has nothing to do with color theory at all. It is medical, not cosmetic. Any trauma to the lip area, whether from lip blushing, microblading adjacent procedures, lip fillers, or even aggressive dental work, can trigger a herpes simplex outbreak in anyone who carries the dormant virus, even if that person has not had a visible cold sore in decades. This is a genuinely common and under-discussed risk. Many clients do not disclose a history of cold sores during intake screening, sometimes because they have not experienced one in so long they no longer consider themselves prone to them, and sometimes because the intake process itself is rushed by clinics eager to get through a booked schedule. Practitioners who take this risk seriously recommend a prophylactic course of antiviral medication in the week before and the week after any procedure involving lip trauma for anyone with a personal history of cold sores, regardless of how long ago that history was. This is a simple, inexpensive precaution. It is also, by multiple documented accounts, frequently skipped. Across the wave of content now circulating under the label lip blush horror story, a consistent pattern emerges, and it is worth naming clearly because it goes beyond individual bad luck. Clients repeatedly describe a rushed consultation process. Not enough time spent discussing undertone, skin type, desired shape, or medical history. A number of accounts describe technicians who altered the natural shape of a client's lips beyond what was discussed or agreed, overlining a lip line in pursuit of symmetry when the client had explicitly requested a subtle, natural enhancement and instead received a visibly different lip shape that they now have to live with or pay to have corrected. The healing timeline itself is another recurring source of disappointment. Multiple accounts describe results that looked promising immediately after the procedure, often because of temporary swelling that makes the color appear more even and more saturated than it will be once healing is complete, only to fade unevenly over the following days and weeks, leaving patchy, inconsistent color that requires a follow-up retouch session, sometimes more than one. And underlying nearly every account of regret is the same emotional core, the specific frustration of being unable to simply remove or change something you no longer like. With lipstick, if you dislike the shade, you wipe it off and try another one. With lip blushing, an unwanted result is not a 5-minute fix. It is a commitment that fades slowly, unevenly, over months or years, and correcting or removing it typically requires further procedures, further cost, and further trauma to the same delicate tissue that caused the problem in the first place. That asymmetry, a mistake that takes 30 seconds to make and years to undo, is the single most important thing anyone considering this procedure should understand before booking a consultation. I want to step back now and ask the bigger question, because lip blushing is not really a story of needles and pigment, it is a story of pressure. For decades, the accepted language of beauty enhancement was honest about its own artifice. You wore lipstick? everyone knew you were wearing lipstick. Makeup was understood, culturally, as a performance, something applied and something removed, a tool rather than a permanent alteration of the self. What has shifted, and shifted specifically in the social media era, is the demand that enhancement no longer look like enhancement at all. The aesthetic that dominates platforms right now does not want you to look made up. It wants you to look as though you were simply born this way, symmetrical, evenly toned, permanently glowing, and it wants that appearance available to you the instant you wake up, before coffee, before a mirror, before any effort has been visibly applied. That is a genuinely difficult standard to meet with cosmetics alone. And so the industry has done what industries do when a demand cannot be met by existing tools. It has built new tools. Needles, pigment implantation, melanin neutralization. Procedures that used to exist purely in the world of medical tattooing, used historically to reconstruct pigmentation after surgery or injury, have been repackaged as luxury lifestyle services, marketed with the same soft language used to sell skincare and spa days. There is something worth naming honestly here, specifically for African audiences. The specific technical complexity of lip blushing on melanin-rich skin, the additional sessions, the additional cost, the additional risk of the procedure going wrong, is rarely foregrounded in the marketing aimed at African clients. It should be, because informed consent requires understanding not just what a procedure promises, but what it specifically costs a person with your exact skin tone in time, money, pain, and risk. And there is a deeper question underneath all of this that deserves to be asked without judgment toward anyone who has already made this choice. When an entire generation is willing to sit through hours of needles and months of uncertain healing in pursuit of looking like they did nothing at all, what does that tell us about how much pressure we are actually under to be constantly, effortlessly, permanently presentable? Not for ourselves, for a camera, for a platform, for an audience that never stops watching and never stops comparing. Maybe the real story behind lip blushing is not vanity. Maybe it is the exhaustion of being expected to look flawless at every single moment of a life that is now permanently, digitally documented. And maybe the willingness to tattoo that flawlessness permanently into our own skin is less about beauty and more about surrender, a decision that says, I am tired of performing perfection every single day, so let me make the performance permanent instead. That is worth sitting with, whatever you decide to do with your own lips. This has been Africa Daily. I will see you next time.